Hello, I'm Bakir Sonova and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Israel and Hamas have signed the first phase of a U.S. brokered deal aimed at ending the war in Gaza. U.S. President Donald Trump says most workers affected by the government shutdown will get back pay. And Russia and Central Asian leaders meet in Tajikistan to discuss regional security. Today, the world woke up to historic news from the Middle East. Israel and Hamas have signed the first phase of a U.S. brokered deal aimed at ending the conflict in Gaza. The agreement includes the release of all Israeli hostages and establishes a framework for a ceasefire, with international partners playing a key role in the negotiations.
They have been
U.S. President Donald Trump was handed a note by Secretary of State Marco Rubio during a meeting at the White House on Wednesday, moments before the president announced that a deal to end the war in Gaza was close.
The Secretary of State saying that we're very close to a deal in the Middle East, and they're going to need me pretty quickly, so I will take a couple of more questions.
And that announcement was that Israel and Hamas have signed off on the first phase of the U.S. 20-point proposed Gaza peace deal. Trump said, "I'm very proud to announce that Israel and Hamas have both signed off on the first phase of our peace plan." He added at the end, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Israel, in turn, will withdraw its forces to a mutually agreed upon line, though this doesn't constitute a full troop withdrawal. The so-called yellow line from President Trump's plan has been adjusted. Under the terms of the agreement, Israel is expected to withdraw troops to a pre-agreed line within 24 hours of formal government approval. According to the IDF, that redeployment will leave Israeli forces in control of 53% of Gaza's territory. The agreement, brokered with the involvement of the United States, Egypt, Qatar and Turkey, marks a significant diplomatic breakthrough. It remains unclear whether Hamas has agreed to fully disarm, and questions persist regarding who will govern Gaza following the implementation of the agreement. Israel seeks a durable ceasefire, guarantees for hostage safety and assurances that Hamas will be disarmed, while Gaza's reconstruction is monitored by international partners. Hamas, on the other hand, demands permanent ceasefire terms, complete Israeli troop withdrawal to agreed lines, unrestricted humanitarian access, the return of displaced residents, and reconstruction under a Palestinian technocratic body. While the agreement marks an historic step toward peace, its long-term success will hinge on both sides upholding their commitments and on sustained international support to guide Gaza's recovery.
Global reaction is pouring in from Washington to Ankara and from Paris to Wellington. Leaders are welcoming what many describe as an historic step toward ending the conflict.
Global leaders are welcoming the Gaza deal that secures the release of remaining hostages and promises a new phase of de-escalation. Israeli President Isaac Herzog thanked Trump for his incredible leadership towards securing the release of the hostages. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hailed the deal as a national and moral victory for Israel and said he will convene the cabinet to approve it. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz said the entire nation is waiting and excited for the hostages' return. Posting on X, Katz described the release as a blessing. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan welcomed the Gaza ceasefire and reaffirmed Turkey's commitment to closely monitor its implementation. French President Emmanuel Macron and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also welcomed the Gaza ceasefire. Further afield, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney praised President Trump's leadership and expressed relief for the hostages' imminent return. In New Zealand, Prime Minister Christopher Luxon welcomed the first phase of the Israel-Hamas peace plan announced by President Trump.
For their people.
The Israel Defense Forces welcomed the signing of the agreement for the return of the hostages. Hamas expressed gratitude to Egypt, Qatar and Turkey for mediating the talks and thanked President Trump for his role. The group confirmed it will release all remaining hostages soon, but emphasized it will not renounce the national rights of the Palestinian people, including the right to independence. The United Nations Secretary-General welcomed the agreement and confirmed that the UN will support its full implementation and expand humanitarian aid delivery. Over in the UK, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer called for the immediate lifting of restrictions on humanitarian aid into Gaza. And Australia also welcomed the deal. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese thanked President Trump for his diplomatic efforts and praised the roles of Egypt, Qatar and Turkey.
Over to Israel and Gaza, and there are rare scenes of joy on both sides, with Israelis and Palestinians celebrating in what they hope is finally the end of war.
طبعا الحمد لله على وقف إطلاق النار ووقف شلال الدماء.
Both Israelis and Palestinians poured into the streets on Thursday, clapping and cheering after Israel and Hamas agreed to the first phase of US President Donald Trump's 20-point plan to end the Gaza war. Indirect talks in Egypt brought the breakthrough just a day after the second anniversary of Hamas's cross-border attack that set off the conflict. The deal, announced late Wednesday, includes a ceasefire and hostage exchange. In Khan Yunis, crowds gathered clapping and cheering after experiencing 2 years of heartache and war.
These are moments that are considered historic moments, long awaited by Palestinian citizens after 2 years of killing and genocide that was committed with arrogance against the Palestinian people.
Thank God for the ceasefire, the end of bloodshed and killing. I am not the only one happy. All of the Gaza Strip is happy. All the Arab people, all of the world is happy with the ceasefire.
This is something joyful for us, and we thank our brothers and anyone who contributed, even if verbally, to stop the war and to stop the bloodshed.
Families of hostages living in Washington, D.C. spoke by phone with Trump on Thursday, who told them their loved ones would return on Monday.
Mr. President, we believe in you. We know you've done so much for us over the past, since you became a president, and even before that. And we trust you'll fulfill the mission until every hostage, every 48 of the hostages are home. Thank you so much. Blessed be the peacemakers.
God bless you, Mr. President. God bless America.
Thank you very much. You just take care of yourselves. The hostages will come back. They're all coming back on Monday.
They're coming back. Thank you to the people of Israel, to the soldiers. Thank you to President Trump. Thank you to all who helped bring my son and the hostages back. We won't stop. We won't stop fighting till the last hostage. Matan is coming home.
Truly, the joy is deep, but we have to be realistic. We have to be realistic until they get into the Red Cross vehicle and truly meet the IDF soldiers. Until that moment, we must pray, cry out to the gates of heaven, truly do everything with God's help.
All over Gaza and Israel, there are sounds of celebration blended with quiet prayers, hopeful for a peace that would last beyond the night.
We now go to Tel Aviv, where Blake Sifton will explain the next steps in order for a ceasefire to fully come into effect.
Now that this deal has been agreed to, there are a series of steps that need to happen in order for it to come into effect. The first major step is a cessation of hostilities. Israel must halt its bombardment of Gaza. There have been airstrikes as well as shelling as early as this morning. The next step is it must be voted on and approved by Israel's Security Cabinet, and we expect that to happen later today. Israeli forces will then complete a withdrawal to agreed upon lines. We understand that must be completed within 24 hours. And then Hamas must release all 48 Israeli hostages, including the living as well as the dead. In return, Israel will exchange some 250 so-called security prisoners. These are high security prisoners in Israeli jails serving life sentences. They will also release 1,700 Palestinians who were detained in Gaza. Now, that's what we do know. There are several things, however, at this stage that remain unclear. We do not know where Israeli forces will withdraw to under the stipulations of this deal. As the deal was written in the proposal that President Trump put forth, they would withdraw to lines they held in August, which would mean they remain in control of Palestinian population centers. However, we understand that during the talks, Hamas was pushing for them to withdraw to lines they held in January outside of Palestinian population centers. And we also still do not know the identity of the Palestinian high security prisoners that will be released by Israel. We understand Hamas is pushing for the highest profile prisoners. These are prisoners that Israel views as the most notorious and the most reluctant to release. So we're still waiting to hear information on those identities. Now, despite that, we've seen scenes of joy, of relief in both Gaza and in Israel at the emergence of this news today. People in Gaza are hopeful that the war may finally be over, that they will finally have respite, but they are also expressing caution. They are concerned that once Hamas releases the hostages, it is possible that Israel could renew hostilities. So people in Gaza are hopeful, but also cautious. And here in Israel, there's been scenes of widespread joy and jubilation. The family members of the hostages held in captivity in Gaza are very excited by this news, as are their supporters. However, there has also been some caution there. The umbrella group representing the families of the hostages have said of the news that they received the news with a mix of excitement, anticipation, and concern, and the struggle will not end until the last hostage is released. Now, even as we have reactions from both Gaza and Israel, and there is excitement and hope that this first phase of the deal has been agreed on, we have to remember that there's still much work to be done to see the realization of the entire peace proposal. Key issues remain that need to be overcome, including the demilitarization of Gaza, the disarming of Hamas, as well as discussions and decisions on who will govern Gaza and who will make up this body of independent Palestinian technocrats that is meant to govern Gaza in place of Hamas. Blake Sifton for A News in Tel Aviv.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that he might visit Egypt this weekend as his team works to finalize the Gaza hostages for ceasefire agreement. He indicated that the trip would likely occur either prior to the release of the hostages or shortly afterwards.
I may go there sometime toward the end of the week, maybe on Sunday, actually. We'll let you know. If that's the case, we'll be leaving probably on Sunday, maybe Saturday, maybe a little later than Saturday evening, but that seems to be our.
Now, the world will find out on Friday who wins the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. Here is a look at how one of the world's most prestigious awards is actually decided.
The Nobel Peace Prize will be announced on Friday, chosen from 338 nominees worldwide. But how does the selection really work? It begins in Oslo with the Norwegian Nobel Committee, 5 people appointed by Norway's parliament. Each one is put forward by a political party, so the group roughly reflects the balance of power in Norwegian politics. Next comes the question of who can win. The committee follows Alfred Nobel's will from 1895, which says the award should go to whoever has done the most to promote peace, reduce conflict, and advance cooperation among nations.
Now, the more complicated answer is that needs to be placed in the current context. The committee operates with a dynamic understanding of the will for very good reasons. And there's no codification of exactly what is emphasized in the Nobel Committee's deliberations.
Thousands of people, including parliament members, heads of state, university professors, and past laureates.
The two largest categories of people with the right to nominate are firstly academics, and that would mean all professors and associate professors, even retired professors within all of the social sciences, theology, philosophy, law, and history. That's already quite a few people in the world that can nominate there. The second largest category is all members, all sitting members of national assemblies and governments anywhere in the world.
Nominations must be submitted by January 31st each year. From there, the committee creates a shortlist. Each candidate is reviewed by independent experts. The group meets about once a month and aims for consensus, but if members can't agree, they vote. While the names are secret, some nominators go public. Among those revealed this year are the International Criminal Court, NATO, Hong Kong activist Chow Hang-tung, and Canadian lawyer Irwin Cotler. And while leaders from several countries claim to have nominated US President Donald Trump, those submissions came too late to count. Experts say his current policies make a win unlikely. Instead, many expect the committee to honour humanitarian workers, journalists, or a United Nations body, though surprises are always possible. Finally, the winner receives a gold medal, a diploma, 11 million Swedish crowns, about $1.19 million, and global recognition overnight.
The government shutdown in the United States has entered its 9th day, and President Donald Trump says most federal workers will eventually be compensated for missed wages. However, he also suggested that not everyone affected will be eligible, saying some people don't deserve support and will be taken care of differently. Trump once again blamed Democrats for the ongoing deadlock, while Congress remains at a standstill with no agreement inside. Meanwhile, the Internal Revenue Service announced that more than 34,000 employees will be furloughed starting on the 8th of October, further impacting services across the country.
Well, we're going to see most of them are going to get back pay, and we're going to try and make sure of that. But some of them are being hurt very badly by the Democrats, and they therefore won't qualify. Democrats want to make it worse. The Democrats want to approve health care for illegals coming into our country, many of them coming in from prisons and mental institutions and drug dealers. They want to give them health care. We don't want that for our people because that's going to destroy the health care that we already have. We'd like to make Obamacare better for people, less expensive and better.
The ongoing U.S. government shutdown continues to affect communities across the United States. Charity organizations and food banks say they are preparing to address a potential increase in demand for assistance among affected families.
An Arizona charity that helps feed families in need says it expects demand for its services to rise as the U.S. government shutdown continues. Thousands of federal workers were furloughed when the Republicans and Democrats weren't able to reach an agreement on its spending budget by the 1st of October. The Society of St. Vincent de Paul in Phoenix provides food, rental assistance and other support to the community.
Anytime someone suddenly doesn't receive a paycheck that they're expecting for their house and their livelihood, it can really cause a lot of stress on themselves and their families, and it can cause a need for them to seek support from places like St. Vincent de Paul to get the food that they need to feed their families, to get help with rent, to get help with utilities. And we expect that we could see some increases with people in our community needing that help.
This week, volunteers and staff were making meals and collecting food and water donations. St. Vincent de Paul says it serves £7 million of food to the community each year.
It's always hard to know how much people need our help, but at the end of the day, because there's so many people willing to give back, it also, I think, still remains hopeful that we can be here for each other and we can be here to lend a hand.
Furloughed federal workers and essential federal employees will not receive paychecks until the shutdown ends. However, they are expected to receive back pay once an agreement is reached.
France is in political turmoil once again, with President Emmanuel Macron set to name a new prime minister within 48 hours after Sébastien Lecornu's government collapsed just hours taking office. Lecornu resigned only hours after being sworn in France's shortest-lived government in modern history. Lecornu, France's fifth prime minister in 2 years, quit amid threats of a no-confidence vote from both opposition and allies. He has since met political leaders at Macron's request, saying a new government is possible but difficult. The crisis highlights deep divisions in parliament, where no party holds a majority. The UK and India are strengthening their economic partnership. On the final day of his visit to India, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer met with his Indian counterpart Narendra Modi to announce a major wave of Indian investment into the UK. The leaders announced new investments worth $1.75 billion from 64 Indian companies into the UK. The pair also discussed the recently finalized trade deal and the joint technology security initiative launched last year. The trip included Britain's largest ever trade mission to India, with more than 100 companies and organizations taking part. Officials say the new agreement aims to boost trade by more than $34 billion by 2040. Welcome back to A News. In a major development in the Israel-Gaza conflict, Israel and Hamas have reportedly agreed to the first phase of a Gaza peace deal after 3 days of intense indirect negotiations in Egypt. U.S. President Donald Trump announced that this initial agreement could pave the way for a ceasefire, the release of hostages and the withdrawal of Israeli troops to an agreed line. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called it a great day for Israel, while Hamas confirmed its commitment to ending the war in Gaza, allowing humanitarian aid and exchanging hostages for Palestinians in Israeli jails. To help us unpack this historic development, we are joined by Ilan Sialom, a geopolitical analyst speaking to us from Paris, France. Mr. Sialom, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Sialom, how significant is first phase agreement between Israel and Hamas in broader context of the conflict?
Well, the first phase is essentially a hostage for ceasefire deal. Israel halts, as you say, its offensive and begins limited troop pullback, and Hamas at the same time release all surviving hostages and allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. So it's fragile, but it's historic because this is the first structured exchange of commitments since the war began. So it doesn't solve the deeper issues like the control, the governance, the security issues, but it transforms paralysis into motion. So symbolically, it's the first crack in a total war, and strategically, I will say that it's a test of whether either side still believes negotiation is possible.
Mr. Sialom, what role did Egypt play in facilitating these indirect negotiations?
Well, Egypt was an indispensable bridge. As you know, the talks happened in Sharm el-Sheikh under Egyptian mediation. We need to remember that Cairo holds a unique position in the region. It's a peace treaty they have with Israel since more than 40 years, long-standing channels with Hamas, and a real leverage over Gaza through its border. So Egypt offered discretion and plausible deniability, allowing enemies to negotiate without speaking directly. So it didn't just hold the talks, it engineered the atmosphere of quiet realism that made the first phase possible.
And how much influence did the United States and specifically President Donald Trump have on the outcome?
Enormous influence. The first phase is rooted in the Trump administration peace framework. I prefer to talk about trust framework because we are very far off peace for the moment. So if we come back to the framework, Washington sets the calendar, the sequencing, and the pressure points. Trump personal diplomacy, the constant calls, the public deadlines, and the implicit threats of political consequences, all that forced momentum where none existed. So Netanyahu publicly thanked him, Hamas accepted under pressure, the US wrote the scripts, Egypt directed it, and the region is now living the first act.
So, in your opinion, what are the main challenges in implementing the first phase of the deal?
The choreography, I will say, is complex and trust is minimal. Hostages must be released, Israeli troops withdrawn, and aid convoys coordinated, all under mutual suspicions. So the text is deliberately vague. What exactly is the agreed line of withdrawal? Who verifies it? One misunderstanding or one violent provocation could unravel the entire process. So the biggest threats come from within. Hardliners in Israel and radical faction in Gaza who views compromise as a defeat. So managing internal spoilers will decide whether implementation succeeds.
So what do you think? Could this agreement realistically lead to a durable and lasting peace in Gaza?
None on its own. Let's be clear. This is a pause, not a peace. A durable settlement would require Hamas to demilitarize Israel, to fully lift its blockades, and a new government structure to come into Gaza. So none of that part is in that phase. So right now, the truce opens a channel that's been closed since 2023. So if the next stage include security guarantees, reconstruction, international oversight, it could evolve into a longer-term arrangement. Still, let's be clear, peace requires political courage, not just exhaustion.
Mr. Sialom, what are the humanitarian implications if Israel withdraws and Hamas allows aid into Gaza?
They are really profound. Gaza is on the brink of collapse. Hospitals without power, food and water nearly gone. So the first phase would reopen crossings, allow fuels and medicine in, and give civilians their first real respite in months. So it's not recovery, but it's really on different areas, it's survival. Aid agencies can finally move. Children can sleep without bombs overhead. So for millions of Gazans, this isn't politics. It's the difference between family and hopes.
Ilan Sialom, thank you very much for talking to A News. We sincerely appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. The Russia Central Asia Summit kicks off today in Dushanbe, bringing together the President of Russia and regional leaders for high-level talks on cooperation and security. The discussions are expected to focus on strengthening economic ties, boosting energy collaboration, and coordinating efforts to counter terrorism. Earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin on a three-day visit was welcomed by Tajik President Emomali Rahmon. On Friday, Dushanbe will host another regional event, the Summit of the Commonwealth of Independent States. Leaders from member countries will discuss strengthening cooperation and key regional issues. As security measures tighten in Dushanbe ahead of leaders from Central Asian countries, including Russian President Vladimir Putin, arriving for the CIS summit, what will this event mean for the region? And will Moscow reposition itself within Central Asia? Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina explains.
From October 8th to 12th, Dushanbe is under heightened security as it hosts a series of high-level events, including the CIS summit, a Central Asia-Russia meeting, and President Vladimir Putin's first state visit to Tajikistan in years. Markets are closed, prayers suspended, and residents urged to limit travel. Leaders of 8 CIS countries will meet on October 10th to discuss regional security, economic cooperation and humanitarian issues. The spotlight, however, is on Russia's talks with Central Asian leaders, focusing on counterterrorism and cross-border threats, with a joint statement expected. The meetings come amid Russia's war in Ukraine and growing sanctions pressure. Analysts say Moscow is seeking to reinforce its presence in Central Asia as competition from China, the European Union, Turkey and Gulf states intensifies. In recent Central Asia, China and Central Asia EU meetings brought pledges of multi-billion-dollar investments, highlighting Russia's limited economic leverage in the region. Fariza Kalimurzana, Almaty, A-News.
President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev arrived in Dushanbe on Thursday to attend the summit of the Commonwealth of Independent States. Azerbaijani leader was welcomed at Dushanbe International Airport by Rustam Emomali, chairman of the National Assembly of Tajikistan, and other officials. The CIS summit, set for the 10th of October, will gather leaders from across the region to discuss cooperation, economic ties, and security challenges facing member states. Looking to regional diplomacy, Ankara is set to host a high-level meeting of the defense ministers of Azerbaijan, Turkey and Georgia. According to the Georgian Defense Ministry, the meeting will discuss a strategic partnership in a trilateral format. The gathering follows last year's talks in Batumi. The Georgian Defense Minister will also hold bilateral meetings with his counterparts, after which the ministers are expected to sign a joint declaration and deliver statements. Turkish and Syrian foreign ministers have pledged to intensify action in combating terrorism and stabilizing the region. Speaking in Ankara, Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said that Ankara will continue to support Damascus's fight against the Daesh terrorist group, emphasizing that Syria's security is inseparable from Turkey's own. Turkish and Syrian foreign ministers have vowed to boost cooperation against terrorism and strengthen regional stability. At a joint news conference with his Syrian counterpart Assad al-Shaybani, Hakan Fidan underscored that Israel's continued airstrikes on Syrian territory remain the country's gravest security threat, warning that such aggression must be firmly opposed. Both Syria and Turkey accused the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, of undermining the country's security and unity, with the Turkish foreign minister reaffirming commitment to Damascus.
The Syrian government has the will to conduct simultaneous operations against Daesh. We must all support Syria in strengthening its capabilities for this purpose. Turkey will continue to contribute to enhancing these capacities. We thoroughly evaluated all these issues and the steps needed to swiftly implement the March 10th agreement.
The 10th of March agreement aims to integrate the SDF into state institutions, reaffirming Syria's territorial integrity and rejecting any separatist ambitions.
We demand the SDF and its leadership to put all effort into implementing this agreement. Failure to do so would harm confidence in Syria's unity and slow our reintegration process.
Al-Shaybani accused the SDF of stalling key measures vital to Syria's stability. Both ministers agreed that peace can only be achieved through joint comprehensive counter-terrorism efforts and pledged to continue coordination to ensure the March deal is fully enforced. Welcome back to A News. Now, again, we turn our attention to Dushanbe, where leaders from Russia and Central Asia are meeting for the second Russia-Central Asia Summit. The discussions are expected to focus heavily on regional security, particularly the worsening situation in Afghanistan, as well as deepening economic and transport cooperation. Tomorrow, the agenda expands as presidents from Armenia, Azerbaijan and Belarus join the meeting for the annual Commonwealth of Independent States Summit, a key platform for shaping political and economic coordination across the post-Soviet space. These back-to-back gatherings come at a time of shifting geopolitical dynamics, with Russia, China and the United States all seeking greater influence in Central Asia, a region once seen as Moscow's traditional sphere of influence. Joining me now to unpack the significance of these summits, their outcomes and the broader geopolitical implications is Murad Muradov, Deputy Director at Topchubashev Center from Baku, Azerbaijan. Murad, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you and good afternoon.
Murad, to start, how significant is this annual Russia-Central Asia Summit, the second Russia-Central Asia Summit, in the broader context of Moscow's engagement with the region?
First I must say that it's now it takes place in very different circumstances. As the war in Ukraine has been intensifying, and the impact of sanctions and also a strike on Russian energy infrastructure having gradually. So for the first time, maybe since the start of the war, Moscow is facing a significant threat of an economic crisis resulting from sanctions and ensuing international isolation. And there are other developments which have also exacerbated, say, Moscow's stance, such as its, let's say, crisis in relation to Azerbaijan, and also recently tightening control over the implementation of sanction regime. So there were reports recently that Kazakhstan has started to control very strictly all the trucks going to Russia and stops the exports of so-called goods of dual use, which are often used in the military industry, and it's equipment, technology, etc., which of course puts Russia at risk of a significant shortage of supply of vital resources and goods for its war effort. So I think that for Moscow now, it's a matter of life or death to keep relations with Central Asian countries and find ways to keep them interested in mutual cooperation in this very difficult era.
Murad, what do you think? How is the situation in Afghanistan shaping the summit's security agenda?
Well, you know that Tajikistan now remains Russia's military outpost in Central Asia. It's the only country where it has a full-fledged military base, which of course keeps Moscow as a major security player in the region. And since 2021, when Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan, of course, the Tajik government has had to rely on Moscow more in terms of preserving its security. And despite, let's say, Tajikistan's efforts to somehow influence the politics of Afghanistan, support the Northern Alliance and other anti-Talib forces, so it hasn't played out. And so now, of course, there is certain dependency on Moscow in that aspect. And I think it's one of the factors which keep Russia, like a big player. And of course, I'm sure that the fact of Taliban has always been on the table, and it's now it will be discussed, I think. The problem is that Tajikistan per se has very little economic, benefit for Moscow. Unlike Uzbekistan, it's not a big trade partner and doesn't have any significant production, and let's say apart from security, well, as I've mentioned, so Russia is now interested in keeping economic cooperation with the region and the trade back on track, and maybe to find some other ways to avoid sanctions. Yeah, in this regard, Tajikistan is not so major player, but of course, given the development of regional infrastructural projects, some of them also aim to connect Central Asia through Tajikistan and Afghanistan to South Asia. Yeah, I guess certain Russian security guarantees, regarding Taliban, may become very relevant.
Murad, tomorrow's CIS summit will bring in Armenia, Azerbaijan and Belarus. What key messages or outcomes should we expect from that broader format?
Well, CIS for many years hasn't been really, let's say, a major political so it's rather than like a space for meetings between different countries, and especially now, when, as I said, so Moscow and Baku have had a very tumultuous year, filled with many misunderstandings, and now especially after June 2025, after let's say arrests and murder of two Azerbaijanis in Yekaterinburg, so having a full-fledged crisis in bilateral relations. So this time, CIS will again play a role of where leaders can meet and discuss, all the issues which they now accumulated, and maybe to find ways to establish a new normality in mutual relations.
Murad, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov confirmed that Presidents Putin and Ilham Aliyev will meet today. What are the main issues likely to dominate their bilateral talks?
Yeah, okay, as I said, so it will be the first meeting of the presidents since last year, since the crisis started in December 25 and intensified in June this year. So if you remember, so in August, President Aliyev and Putin, they very briefly met in China during the SCO summit, when they just shook hands, but there wasn't much conversation, which at that time also confirmed really the very significant tension between the countries. So now the fact that there is a meeting, it shows that there is certain progress in negotiations and talks in the government level, and so most probably the August meeting of the commissions headed by Vice Prime Ministers Mustafayev and Oberchuk and Astrakhan, is kind of managed to bring economic agenda, which may now become a foundation of, let's say, again, a renewed relationship. And so probably there are at least some willingness, say, both sides, of course, in Moscow, to de-escalate, because basically it's been Moscow behind and say tensions and etc. So, and I'm sure that if there are no, let's say, expectations of any positive outcomes, this meeting would have taken place, first of all. So yeah, I think we may witness some statements in that, relieving tensions to an extent.
Murad, in your opinion, how are Central Asian states balancing their relations among Russia, China and the West, especially amid sanctions pressure and energy realignments?
Well, of course, it's it's $1 million question for all the basically countries in the region to more or less extent. Well, some of them, like Kyrgyzstan, still they remain more or less in the Russian orbit, but most others are really trying to balance. And on the other hand, given the logistics, energy, and resources opportunities they have, Central Asian countries now have a certain gold ticket, let's put it this way, which helps them to manage their relations with Russia, with the West, and China, since all of them are interested, and it's not in the interest of any of those actors to, let's say, to press too much on any of them. But on the other hand, of course, given this sensitivity, the pressure has been increasing, and this is why, for example, Kazakhstan has now also has to control its exports to Russia much more. And also, I think another issue which is important now is OTS. Just a few days ago, there was a summit in Gaza in Azerbaijan, where the countries agreed to establish a new format, OTS Plus, which is directly relevant to the region's relations with Russia and China, because these countries, which have significant Turkic minority, for many years have been worried, let's put it this way, about the growth of OTS and whether it may be we have an anti-Russian, let's say, proclivance. And so I guess that this new format will, first of all, involve, let's say, Russia and China in a way which would help to bring them in and, to a certain extent, dispel these worries and concerns.
Murad Muradov, thank you very much for talking to A News. We greatly appreciate your time and expertise on such an important topic. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
You're up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for more.